Tonight, the coronavirus curve in Victoria jumps upwards as more workers from a Melbourne abattoir test positive. Also tonight, Victoria farewells the youngest officer killed in the Eastern Freeway crash. Riding out the storm, Melbourne players head north so the NRL can resume. And the South Gippsland town of Yarram embraces street art in a big way. Good evening, Tamara Oudyn with ABC News. After weeks of dwindling cases and many single-figure increases, Victoria is seeing a spike in the number of people testing positive to coronavirus. 22 new cases were confirmed overnight, the biggest increase here in more than 3 weeks. 19 of those are linked to an abattoir in Melbourne's west. 2 are returned travellers in hotel quarantine, and 1 person is believed to have contracted the virus in the community. It brings the state's total number of cases to more than 1,400. Here's state political reporter Bridget Rollison.
This meatworks in Brooklyn has become the site of one of the state's largest coronavirus clusters.
The plant has been closed for 14 days and they've done that in conjunction with Victorian Health.
The latest results mean 34 people linked to the abattoir now have the virus.
Most of those 19 individuals were asymptomatic, and all of them will have been in quarantine at the time that they've been identified. So it's not a risk to the general community and it's not going to get out of control.
The rest of its 300 workers are being tested. But questions have been raised about why the state government refused to name the company after it was revealed it had donated $15,000 to the Labor Party at the last election.
Daniel Andrews needs to explain why this one company that's an ALP donor has been treated so differently from primary schools, hospitals and aged care facilities.
Is naming the business critical to tracing all the people that might have the virus as a result of an outbreak in a business? That's what guides this, that and nothing else.
As the number of infections ramped up, so did the search for possible cases. Yesterday, Victoria conducted 13,000 coronavirus tests, the biggest single day of testing of any state in the country.
We're very, very pleased, of course, by the take-up rate, the fact that we've now hit and surpassed the halfway mark of our testing blitz. This testing blitz will continue through to Sunday.
The state's on track to reach its goal of 100,000 coronavirus tests in a fortnight, which will help the government decide if and when coronavirus restrictions can be eased. 56,000 tests have been conducted since the blitz was announced a week ago, but the Premier says the new outbreak shows just how rapidly the situation can change.
But none of us can assume, just because we're frustrated, that this is over. It is far from over, and we have to stay the course.
Bridget Rollison, ABC News, Melbourne.
The Melbourne cluster was the main reason for the national jump in cases today too. Here's Casey Briggs.
The ACT is no longer coronavirus-free. It went 4 straight days without a single active infection, but the Territory has today recorded 1 new case. We're seeing low levels of infection right across the country, except in Victoria. 19 of its new cases today linked to 1 single abattoir in a cluster that's now been associated with 34 cases. We're likely to see this from time to time, a single case sparking an outbreak. We've seen it in Sydney aged care homes and we've seen it in Tasmania. These are all of the cases the Tasmanian government's linked to a single outbreak in the northwest of the state. Just a single case in mid-March, most likely a Ruby Princess cruise ship passenger, has turned into more than 100. This is the day the Tasmanian government shut 2 hospitals in a bid to try and contain the spread. The good news is the testing rate is really picking up in the last few days, which means it's more likely we'll be able to catch outbreaks earlier in the piece. We're seeing that in Victoria. Just yesterday, 13,000 people swabbed in a single day. We're living in unprecedented times. And if you're sick of hearing that word, I don't blame you. Search traffic for the word unprecedented worldwide is unprecedented.
While remote learning will be the state of play here in Victoria for the rest of the term, students in other states will gradually trickle back to the classroom in the coming weeks. But the news that 2 schools in Melbourne and Sydney had to be shut down over the weekend has again triggered fears about what might happen once kids return en masse. Connor Duffy reports on the data and science that's driving the decisions.
Phil Beresford lived a parent's coronavirus nightmare 3 times. 2 of his children, Natalie and Liam, had mild symptoms, but it was a different story for 15-year-old Dylan.
That made for a fairly quick trip into town to the Children's Hospital, and they took x-rays. I will say that during that time I got a little bit higher level of anxiety than normal.
Phil kept his children home from school while awaiting their test results, saving exposure to 1,600 other youngsters. But he soon caught the virus himself. The federal government's health advice has been consistent throughout, that schools are low risk and classrooms are safe. States have also been quick to close down schools where outbreaks occur. New South Wales is the only state to have done a major study into schools. Between the 5th of March and 3rd of April, there were a total of 20 cases from 15 different schools. 11 of the cases were students, 9 were teachers. But here's the important thing. 18 of the cases originated outside the school. Just 2 students were found to have caught the virus in the classroom.
We think that for some reason, children are getting less severely affected by this disease.
In South Australia, 8 schools have reported cases. On just one occasion at Unley High School was the virus passed from a teacher to a student.
We often measure the viral load in people who have been infected, and it seems like we don't have a clear answer of at what viral load can a person transmit the disease to others.
But schools are not without risks. One of New Zealand's biggest clusters started there. A teacher first tested positive on March 22. The school closed immediately, but the virus had already spread. There are now 46 students and staff who tested positive. 94 people with connections to the school have been infected so far. It's become New Zealand's 2nd largest outbreak.
It doesn't take much to become exposed and catch the virus. That same sort of vigilance needs to be maintained as they progress through opening the schools up.
Warnings from classrooms near and far. Connor Duffy, ABC News.
A so-called trans-Tasman bubble could be the first step towards the reopening of Australia's borders. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has been invited to join Scott Morrison, the Premiers and Chief Ministers at tomorrow's National Cabinet meeting. On the agenda, easing travel restrictions and seizing trade opportunities. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
Jacinda Ardern's nothing if not frank.
This is corrosive to our relationship.
But despite old differences, the Kiwi PM set to join Scott Morrison's National Cabinet.
But it is fair to say such a meeting is without precedent.
Tomorrow's meeting to discuss the lifting of restrictions, as well as the tentative first steps towards reopening Australia's borders.
Including the creation of a trans-Tasman travel bubble.
Make yourself at home.
A bubble that would see the ditch become a trade and tourism zone to the exclusion of others while the coronavirus rages.
Both our countries' strong record on fighting the virus has placed us in the enviable position of being able to plan the next stage in our economic rebuild.
It's a very good opportunity for Australia and New Zealand to show how closely they have worked together.
But before any bubbles put in place, a few things need to be ironed out.
Key public health pillars would need to be around testing for identifying and isolating cases and contacts.
Front of mind will be the importance of maintaining this great achievement that we've made in flattening the curve and preventing further spread.
We're doing really well, Australia.
New Zealand adopting Australia's COVID-safe app, one possible option.
Help prompt people's memories about their movements when we need to do so.
Scott Morrison's ambition for millions more Australians to download the app would benefit from New Zealand's endorsement, although the PM's more pressing diplomatic mission will be to heal relations with another leader, Victoria's Premier.
This is a failure of leadership by Dan Andrews.
The Education Minister's harsh criticism won't be forgotten.
Fighting amongst ourselves is not what's needed. Fighting this virus is what's most important.
A bigger enemy keeping the National Alliance together for now. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
A funeral service has been held for the last of the 4 victims of the Eastern Freeway tragedy. 28-year-old Constable Joshua Presney was honoured in the same way as his fallen colleagues today, ahead of a larger memorial once social distancing restrictions are eased. James Hancock reports.
Joshua Presney followed his brother into the police force, and it was First Constable Alex Presney who gave him his badge when he graduated in December last year. Today he was again by his brother's side, not in celebration, but sorrow.
He will always, always, to us, be a hero.
Joshua Presney's parents Andrew, Belinda and his partner Stacey said their own goodbyes and honoured his short but commended service.
He was such a caring man, and so many commented that he had such a career ahead of him.
The small and private farewell was held at his former school Xavier College in Kew, close to where he was killed on the Eastern Freeway when he and 3 other officers were hit by a truck. His was the last of the 4 funerals, but it was no less poignant, with officers performing what's become a devastatingly familiar observance.
This week and a half, I think, has touched Victorians in a way that not many other things do.
A larger memorial service is planned for Constable Presney and the 3 other officers once social distancing restrictions are relaxed.
There is so much interest that we've commenced the planning already, but we need to wait until we've got some idea of when those restrictions will be lifted that will enable us to do a fitting farewell.
To 4 officers whose sacrifice will be memorialised. James Hancock, ABC News, Melbourne.
A police officer has been suspended and is likely to be charged over photos taken of former North Melbourne AFL coach Dean Laidley while he was in custody. The photos were taken at St Kilda Police Station on Saturday night after Laidley had been arrested and charged with a number of offences, including stalking. A senior constable is expected to be charged with unauthorised disclosure of information.
It's unacceptable conduct. It's appalling conduct, and that type of conduct has no place in our organisation.
Police believe the constable sent the pictures of Laidley to 6 other officers who will all be investigated. The troubled Westgate Tunnel project is now expected to be completed a year later than planned. Toll operator Transurban has told investors the project is running behind schedule and that a new completion date has been set for 2023. Tunnelling for the $6.7 billion road was due to start in October last year, but it's stalled because the project's builders need to find a site to dispose of contaminated soil.
We intend to hold Transurban to that contract, and what's contained in that contract is that for every day that this project is not completed beyond 2022, Transurban lose millions of dollars.
The state government says it was only informed about the delays late last week and that coronavirus has also hampered the project. Still to come this hour, how the coming recession will hit the property market.
It's a pretty scary thought, not being able to pay your mortgage.
Generally what we'd say is around about 15% fall in house prices over the next 12 months.
Also, Dr Norman Swan on the likelihood of a second wave of coronavirus cases over winter. That's coming up.
As Italy prepares to emerge from its 8-week-long lockdown today, grief is turning to anger in the northern Italian region of Lombardy. It remains one of the worst affected regions in the world, accounting for almost half of Italy's coronavirus deaths. And as the country takes its first tentative steps towards reopening, the recriminations have already begun. Europe correspondent Samantha Hawley reports.
In Italy's north, they died in the thousands, leaving an unbearable toll.
It was a terrible period. It was a terrible period.
In the city of Cremona, ICU doctors did all they could.
There were a lot of people, like a war. We were in a war.
The hardest moment was when there were the young patients that I couldn't help. The young patients that died.
The province of Bergamo was worst hit, with more than 2,200 deaths. Amid the grief, there's anger and threats of legal action amid criticism the lockdown should have come far sooner. 81-year-old Giancarlo Gargantini died on March the 7th after initially being refused hospital admission. His daughter wants justice.
I will be making a complaint to the prosecutor's office. I have already contacted a lawyer and I will never stop fighting.
Thai woman Vatani Suvamol has called Bergamo home for 2 decades.
Anger, disappointment, we want answers. Too many people died and too many people risked their lives.
Carlo Chiodi lost his mother and father.
It's impossible to let go of this. There's something not right. I want justice. Something.
One of the worst affected regions in the world is on a long road to recovery. Samantha Hawley, ABC News.
Each week, ABC Victoria is delving deeper into the issues raised by the pandemic and what we need to think about now to make life better when it's over. There seems little doubt that the shift to working from home will become a part of the lives of millions more Australians. But while there are obvious upsides like saving on commuting or childcare costs, there are concerns about a widening gap between those who have the option of working remotely and those who don't. Ben Knight reports.
Danny McFarlane is a childcare worker who loves her job. But these days, she says going to work is scary.
Obviously, social distancing doesn't happen in this sort of industry. Like, you've got to take care of the kids. You can't change their nappies from 2 metres away.
Danny's among the millions of Australians for whom working from home simply isn't an option. As Australia adjusts to the biggest shake-up of the workplace since World War II, there's concern about growing inequality between those who have the option of working from home and those who don't.
People who are more likely to be able to work from home not only derive a steady income, but they're more likely to have paid sick leave benefits, and they are obviously able to keep themselves safe from contagion.
They also earn on average 24% more than so-called frontline workers. The Centre for Future Work estimates that around 15% of Australia's workforce currently has the option of working remotely, but expects that figure will double to around 4 million employees as companies and their workers adapt and embrace the change.
It can be a really, really beneficial thing for people who need to care, who are care workers, who look after children.
And women are significantly more likely to have that option of working remotely than men are. But that's led to other concerns, such as women being left with more of the burden of domestic work while trying to hold down a job in the house. And then there's the stark reality that for some people, going to work is a refuge from a home that simply isn't a safe place to be. As states begin to lift restrictions, the risk to those who have no choice but to work in public increases.
I don't think we get enough recognition for the things that we do and the risk that we put ourselves in every single day.
And for many days to come. Ben Knight, ABC News.
Now to the second in our series on the falling price of petrol. Last night we looked at why the price of crude oil has dropped so sharply in recent weeks. And tonight, Phil Lasker takes us through how that translates at the pump, but in some cases why it doesn't.
Another 350,000 barrels of cheap oil slowly making its way to the docks. Just as slow have been price cuts to motorists, not simply by a matter of weeks or days.
Some months in many cases.
Worse still, even during the coronavirus shutdown, the national retail margin has been extremely high, over 20 cents a litre. Oil companies have been gradually lifting the average profit margin. At Mount Isa, the captive market is still paying through the nose, and in Darwin, motorists are angry.
I find it ridiculous. I have cousins down in Wodonga and Victoria at the moment only paying 90 cents a litre.
I don't know, I suppose we just got to suck it up in Darwin here.
Petrol bosses will front a parliamentary inquiry in the Northern Territory to be grilled on prices, while the ACT is threatening legislation to cap the retail margin on fuel. Mark McKenzie says national retail sales have plunged 50%, leaving some regional family operations in trouble.
And they're very much now on the edge and are looking to the banks and the various mechanisms provided by government and the stimulus measures to stay alive.
FuelTrack says unleaded petrol should not cost more than 99 cents a litre in capital cities. Here, unleaded petrol is selling for 83.9 cents a litre. A kilometre away, it's selling for almost $1.20 a litre. It's as if down the road they've been hit with a wholesale price increase of more than 30 cents a litre in the last few days. It's all part of that mysterious fuel price cycle.
There has been no 30-cent litre increase in the underlying wholesale price in that period. That's why I refer to them as the fake fuel cycles.
But FuelTrack says enjoy it while it lasts because it can't get much better. Philip Lasker, ABC News.
The pandemic has prompted 500,000 Australians to seek loan repayment relief from the banks, and more than 1 million have applied to dip into their super. Here's Alan Kohler.
Here's why the property market isn't collapsing yet. 307,000 people have been let off their mortgage repayments, so they don't have to sell the house having lost their job. The total amount of repayments that the banks have foregone, according to the Australian Bankers Association, including business loans and credit cards, is $6.8 billion. Also, 1 million super fund members have now applied for a total of $8.38 billion of their super, which is an average of a bit more than $8,000, which is less than the maximum allowed in early release of $10,000 this year. And the other bit of coronavirus recession news today was that consumer spending has lost all of the momentum gained from the stimulus package in late March. The index is based on actual spending by 250,000 people, so pretty solid data. On the share market today, Westpac released its horrible half-year result. Profit down 62%, $1.9 billion added to loan impairment provisions, and the dividend deferred. Westpac's share price went up though because it wasn't as bad as expected, and the banks, retailers and CSL pulled the index up by 1.2%. Afterpay shares jumped nearly 25% because the Chinese online commerce giant Tencent has bought 5% of the company. The US market fell quite heavily on Friday, which was May the 1st, prompting everyone to remember the old saying, sell in May and go away. And here's why people say that. The average performance on the US market from May to October is in orange on the graph. And from November through April, it's blue, which is when all the money is made on the share market, on average. The Australian dollar has slid back down below 64 US cents. And finally, it's Star Wars Day, May the 4th. So here's a chart of the revenue totals for the biggest box office franchises. Star Wars has just lightsabered James Bond. And that's finance.
The Melbourne Storm will relocate to the New South Wales border town of Albury on Wednesday to begin training for the resumption of the NRL season later this month. All 16 clubs have met for the first time in 6 weeks for an education day, running through the strict biosecurity measures they'll need to follow.
The Melbourne Storm at home for now, but soon to set up camp in the New South Wales border town of Albury.
Should players or staff wish to head home during a day or two off, then they've got the ability to do so.
The team will have sole use of an accommodation venue and train at a local rugby league ground.
The gates will be locked. We have to operate under what's called green zones.
Storm players met in Melbourne this morning for a crash course on the tough new biosecurity measures they'll now need to follow. They also thanked the Warriors, who've left family in New Zealand to effectively save this year's rugby league season.
Just really appreciate it, and hope you guys enjoy quarantine. I know I didn't.
The Warriors appear dedicated to the cause. Some players have already begun training in Tamworth.
You got to deliver, you got to perform, and it's the toughest competition in the world.
Steve Kearney confirmed hooker Nathaniel Roach has tested negative to COVID-19. He's set to travel to Australia along with centre David Fusatua, who stayed in New Zealand for personal reasons.
He may have to go into self-isolation in a hotel room. That's obviously worst case scenario.
All 16 teams reunited for the first time in weeks for the biosecurity training.
If everyone buys into it, everyone's listening to the protocols, I think, things will run smoothly.
At Broncos headquarters, the players were asking the important questions.
It was mainly, the simple questions like, can we go to a cafe and grab a coffee?
When training begins, players will be broken up into groups of 10 or less, and no tackling will be allowed for at least the first week.
And the team that adapts the best will come out of the box really well, and the team that ends up winning the premiership will have done a hell of a job.
Training will resume on Wednesday. Michael Reddy, ABC News.
The small Victorian community of Yarram has been overtaken by street art. The Mongolian-born graffiti artist Hisko, famous for his work in Melbourne's laneways, has moved to the country to paint 10 giant murals around the South Gippsland community. And the locals are so impressed they've decided to rename Yarram Hisko Town. This report from Rachel Lucas.
My name is Hosnarung Hurutpatar, but everybody calls me Hisko. I was born and raised in Mongolia, and I moved to Australia in '99. Since I moved to Australia, that I started looking into like graffiti and street art a bit more, and I went to art school in Sydney. It's only when I moved to Melbourne in 2010 that I just started painting walls, and haven't looked back since.
This particular project started when Eric Greenaway, who's the local Yarram identity, came into our bar one night and thought, I love this work that you've had Hisko come down and put on the bar. What would happen if we got 10 of these done around town and we actually attracted a whole lot of people to come to Yarram and called it Hisko Town?
It's incredibly progressive for a town to turn into street art. The silos are just one big thing that people can look at, whereas it's a whole town with lots of things. To be able to do it as just a one artist thing, it's really, really unique.
We're going to put QR codes on every building, and those codes will take people back to a web page that will then give the backstories of all the things behind each image and why it's there, and also lead them into places to stay, where to go, where to eat, and all the other attractions of living here in this fabulous part of the world.
I really enjoy working in rural communities because people really show appreciation for this type of art. I can see how it changes the local dynamics and local community. To me, that's the reward for this kind of work.
Time for the weather now. Here's Paul Higgins.
And Tam, this is what happened after an Antarctic blast over the weekend that's left behind 60 to 80 centimetres of snow at Victoria's alpine resorts. But if the chilly weather wasn't to your taste, it will be a little bit warmer this week. -4 degrees at Mount Hotham overnight. Rutherglen was chilliest out of the mountains with a low of 1. Cloudy skies for much of Victoria today. We did have some showers or drizzle in the south, and for a change, it was actually mildest near the coast, with areas inlet on the surf coast mildest with 18 degrees. In Melbourne City, a high today of 14.8 at 1:37 this afternoon. That's actually 2 degrees below normal for May. In the quietish streets outside right now, it is 13. Canberra had its first sub-zero night this year, and in fact the coldest night since September. Showers and thunderstorms rolled through Perth this afternoon. They came with this cold front you can see over here that will actually slip away to the south before it gets to us. There is another cold front, though, as you can see looming behind it. That one is going to decay and just clip our southwest on Thursday. We have a large high over us tomorrow, bringing a mostly sunny day. Wednesday will be a bit warmer thanks to a north wind freshening. There'll be some high cloud around then. And then on Thursday, a shower or two, mostly in the southwest and on the northeast ranges. But early Saturday, a stronger cold front will bring showers and chilly air. That's right, just in time for the weekend. Tomorrow, Perth will have late showers and thunderstorms. In Adelaide and Canberra, sunny skies. Hobart and Brisbane will be partly cloudy, and in Sydney, they're expecting a shower or two. Back home, we have single-digit lows right across the board tonight with those clearing skies and light winds. Some morning fog patches around and also some frost in the northeast because it's getting rather close to zero there tonight. There's a slight chance of an early shower out here in East Gippsland. Otherwise, a mostly sunny day. On the bays, a northerly wind at 10 to 15 knots. Well, cold in Melbourne tonight, down to 7 in the city. We'll have fog patches in the morning. But after that all burns off, we are in for a sunny Tuesday and a slightly better than earlier forecast high of 19. Light winds in the morning, they will become northerly in the afternoon. On Wednesday, mostly sunny. There will be some high cloud around, 19. Thursday, partly cloudy and a fresh north wind, 21. Friday, a slight chance of a shower, 21. And then a wet Saturday. Somewhere between 2 and 6 millimetres of rain. Small hail in the afternoon and 15. For Mother's Day, Sunday, 15 degrees again, up to 2 millimetres of rain and a shower or two on Monday, Tam.
Thank you, Paul. And that's it for this evening's bulletin. Lee Sales is up next with 7:30.